Hello everyone and welcome back to Animation Pilgrimage, the show where Whitney and I take a look at every single theatrically released animated film in chronological order. I'm Tennille.
And I'm Sean Whitney.
Yes.
And today we are taking a look at the 1980 film Bloody Lady from Czechoslovakia.
Yeah. So, content warning for this one right off the bat. We're dealing with a movie that is like... It labels itself as a drama, but I would say it's like a drama horror light film. So there's blood in this one, serial killers, some animal cruelty, murder, and like some nudity.
Yeah. For the most part, the movie doesn't really dwell on any of these things or show it specifically on screen, but like it's a lot of implied stuff.
And like some of it is on screen, but it's also done in such a very...
cartoonish fashion. Well, like literally very simple art style fashion.
Right.
That it doesn't...
It's not cartoony violence. It's not like Tom and Jerry.
Yeah, it's not gory either.
Yeah, it's not like tasteful either. You know, it's just like...
It exists.
It exists, and it's so campy and melodramatic that you don't really take it seriously. It's like watching Tim Burton's Sweeney Todd, where, you know, like the blood is so gushing, like so campy that like you don't really process it as like gory, you know?
I guess.
But there's also less blood in this.
Yeah, there's actually only blood in a couple of scenes for a movie named Bloody Lady.
Yeah. It's enough to just keep things suspenseful, but never like, ooh, no, I can't watch.
So overall, I don't think this one is like too rough to watch, but like it's important to note that it has these things in it.
Right.
Do we want to do a plot synopsis now?
I guess. I guess generally, before going into a plot synopsis on this one, because it is a film that I liked quite a bit, I want to recommend it right off the bat. If how we described this film already kind of sounds like it might be up your alley, check it out. It's only an hour and 10 minutes long.
Yeah, give or take.
Yeah. So this one was fun. And it's got interesting art direction, and it's just kind of a fun watch if you're interested in that kind of very light horror. And there's a part at the beginning that has like a description of what's going on, or like a slight little prelude, but other than that, there's no talking in the film.
So we watched this movie even though there are no English subtitles because the movie's not in English. The movie's in Czech.
Yeah.
And there's only talking for that first 2 minutes, so you skip that, and then it's just a silent movie. Yeah. I mean, not silent, but like, there's no talking.
Dialogue, yeah. And it doesn't need it. It's pretty clear what's going on. So, yeah. Check this one out. Anyway, let's get into the summary.
So, there's a very nice princess gal lady. She's
a noble woman.
Noble woman. She's kind and sweet, and she has noble suitors here to woo her. And she doesn't really care, but she's kind to everyone.
The animals love her.
Gives money to the poor. The animals love her. All this stuff. But one day, she's out in the woods, and... It's
very, like... Disney princess-esque, like the animals come to her and
it's
help her out with stuff.
And then one day she's out and she gets caught in the rain and she catches a cold and she finds a local cabin of local peasant man and he helps nurse her back to health overnight and they immediately fall in love. And so before she leaves the next day, she gives him
her beating heart,
her literal heart, and she leaves,
which is a very cool scene. Like the animation in this is very simplistic, but honestly, like the image of her just like reaching into her chest and then like taking out her beating heart and giving it to this guy and him just like cradling it as it's beating, like that's a very iconic Edgar Allan Poe type edgy shit, and I like it.
So obviously you're not supposed to take everything that happens in this movie in a very literal sense.
Right.
But, like, it's neat.
Yeah.
Anyways, she gave away her heart, and so now she's a heartless bitch.
Yeah, like she
literally
completely 180s here. She goes back to the meadow where she was frolicking with all of her animal friends.
Out of the animals.
Oh, she goes hog wild.
Like, attacks everything. She's evil now. She goes back to her castle, and she tells her servant to play some tricks on her suitors so they hurt themselves.
Oh gosh, yeah. The friggin' arrow through the hand.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, jeez.
Anyways, she's also mean to her servants, and she lashes out with a comb and slashes one of her servants, which means her cheek is bleeding and it drips on her hand. And then she looks at it and she's like, blood.
Blood.
And then the blood turns white and she's like, oh, if I bathe in blood, it will make my skin paler, which is the fashion of the day. Is you want to be as white as possible.
Which, okay, this is where this adaptation of this legend, because spoilers, this is based off of a real historical figure, which we'll get into after we do the plot summary. But this is where this kind of falls apart for me a little bit, because the legend is that this lady killed all these girls to bathe in their blood to retain her youth.
Oh.
So, like, I don't know what this one, like, what this adaptation is getting at with her bathing in blood, because, like, everybody knows the legend that she does that to obtain her youth, but, like, that's not a thing in this one.
Because you can't really spell that out without talking. So this time it's just kind of... I mean, there's, like, whispering voices to her.
Yeah, kind of deal.
Anyways, she wants to bathe in people's blood. So she sends out her servant man to go capture women and then murder them so that she can bathe in it.
Yep.
Bathe in their blood. And so she does this for a while, and eventually everybody just kind of figures out what the hell is going on, and they're like, this is terrible. She also kills off her suitors.
In a hilarious fashion.
With like a robot version of herself that they go up and hug, and then 2 knives come out of her nipples and stab them through the chest, and then she drops their dead bodies through the floor.
Through a trapdoor, like...
That's just really silly.
What?
The 3rd suitor survives because he doesn't hug her. He, like, hugs her legs.
Uh-huh.
So he survives and he escapes, and presumably that's how they find out all this terrible stuff is happening. Anyways, the peasant guy that she gave her heart to finds out about this. So he goes and visits her and tries to give her heart back and says, no, be a good person and stuff. And she takes the heart, and then she just throws it against a wall, and she's like, dog, eat heart.
Right.
I don't need this. I'm evil. So then the main character has to choke out the dog.
Yeah.
So that's a little sad.
Yeah.
And then he takes the heart and runs away. And then he goes to a tavern where the bad guy is, or like the servant guy. And the servant guy is just shown to be an absolute dick all the time.
Yeah, like he's constantly like leering at this noblewoman. But so that when she, you know, has her heel turn and becomes evil, he's just like, ooh, yes, let me do murders for you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me accomplice you in these murders. And it kind of like clears her of doing any murders and puts all the murdering onto him, which is also not accurate.
Yeah. Anyways, he's played up to be just like absolute evil.
Mm-hmm.
And he like taunts the peasant guy in the bar, and they get into a fight eventually, and the peasant guy beats the other guy's head in with a stool, and then he's dead. And then the next scene is, I guess, the local knights or whatever have found her and found her guilty, and so she is put into a sealed off castle all by herself where she cannot escape, and she is very sad and distraught. But wouldn't you know it,
there's some lovely creepy animation of her like freaking out.
Mm-hmm. she's not in there alone because lover boy just can't be without her. So he hid in there as the whole thing got sealed up. So they are there together, and he puts her heart back in her, even though it's way too late at this point, and the movie ends, I guess. So like, there's mixed messages here. It's trying to paint her as fairly innocent because she gave away her heart like a naive person. So, she can't be evil for committing all of these murders. And she didn't do the murdering herself. She had her servant guy do it. So, like, this is apologizing for a woman not being capable of doing terrible things, which is not true.
Yeah.
But, like, it's a movie made in 1980, and, like, it's supposed to be silly and kind of campy. So, like, I don't even care.
It's, like, both trying to be deep, but is also about as deep as, like, a kiddie swimming pool. Like, but it's also just fun. Which
I think is the correct mindset to go into a lot of B movies, B-tier horror
right,
and thriller flicks, which there are a lot of these that exist in like the 70s, 80s, 90s, where there's a killer out to kill everybody and it's over the top and silly, or there's monsters and whatever. And this movie, I definitely feel like fits right into that genre of, it's just supposed to be a silly, fun, campy, movie.
Yeah, it's very like a campfire, scary story type of thing.
Or as the kids would say now, it's the creepypasta.
Like, I don't even think people talk about creepypastas anymore, though.
I kind of do. But, like, that kind of level of, and then it turned out she was evil and murderized the countryside.
Because she gave her heart away. Yeah.
It's that level of, like, silly, campy horror stuff.
So, all that being said, I enjoyed this quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, me too. I thought it was a great bit of fun. On top of that, because the animation is very simplistic, you get some absolutely stunning faces.
Yeah, there's like something like horrible will happen, then it'll switch over to the noblewoman girl.
A still shot of her just kind of standing and staring into space.
Yeah, she's just like dead-faced. And it's like, okay.
It doesn't move for like 5 seconds. It's wonderful.
The robot nipple knife arm thing is like, that's great. That's great. I don't know how she managed to build this thing, but like,
cool.
A+.
Love it.
Okay, so this was directed by Victor Kubal, who directed some other Czechoslovakian films. This is one of his last films, though, and he was known for doing horror animations like throughout his career. So I think this is probably one of his most well-known projects. Unfortunately, there was not a whole lot of information about him that I could find that was actually translated into English. So my knowledge about him and his work is pretty limited, and we haven't seen any of his other works so far, meaning...
He was probably not animated.
Which means that they probably were animated, but they were probably either too short to make our list, or they did require translations for us to actually watch them.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, but this was fun. If his other work is like this, I imagine we would also probably find those fun. However, the main beef of this episode is probably going to be talking about the differences between the real historical figure that this is based on versus the movie. And typically, the legends about this real historical figure, whose name is Elizabeth Bathroy, her actual name is Erzsébet Bathroy, who is a noblewoman of Hungary. The legends around her usually depict her as being like a vampire serial killer noblewoman who killed hundreds of girls and bathed in their blood to retain her youth. And most of those things are accurate, except for the part where she bathes in their blood. That never happened.
And also the vampire.
Oh, yeah, and also the vampire thing.
I can only assume that
Yeah.
she wasn't really a vampire.
No, she was totally a vampire.
Just didn't bathe in blood for whatever reason.
Right. The real Erzsébet Bathroy was actually raised a noble woman her whole life, was married to another noble family. Her husband died after illness because, it was like the late 1500s, early 1600s.
See, people just died.
People just died.
Bad medicine. There wasn't a lot of good medicine around to
Mhm.
deal with stuff.
Apparently, he was gone off in, wars most of the time. But when he did come home, he taught her some torture techniques that he used in the war.
Oh, fun.
And then he died. She was in control of, all this land, which she was in control of most of the time anyway, because he was off to war.
Mm-hmm.
And then she started killing girls. She started just having servants killed, and she made a little etiquette school, I guess, and would have other nobles send their daughters there to, teach them etiquette, and then she'd just murder them and, do terrible things to them. And I'm not going to describe all those things. You can fall down that Wikipedia hole yourself if you're interested.
Mm-hmm.
But, she was apparently so frightening that when people took their complaints to the king was too scared to really want to do anything about it.
Oh.
Because, there were, literally by the time that she was actually caught, there was, over 100 to 200 witnesses of, different acts of violence, or, finding tortured bodies, or, dogs just carrying arms around. And then when they finally arrested her, legend goes that, she was caught red-handed, and there were, girls down in the basements being tortured at that moment. So, yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So, now, of course, because she was a noblewoman, she also had, a ton of accomplices. So, the gravedigger, character in the film
Mm-hmm.
is kind of a representation of all those people, but he takes on a lot more of the blame for a lot of this in this film, rather than the actual historical figure, who is definitely,
Definitely more
part of the action.
She was definitely more hands-on in reality.
Yeah. At least, from what we can know all these years later. Another thing about her that's kind of different than how the film portrays it is that she was essentially, after being convicted of all of this, she was sentenced to house arrest for the rest of her life. And the servants who accomplished her were, of course, burned to the stake and beheaded and all that. So, they were actually punished for her crimes, but she was just put in house arrest. And the film has her being, bricked in somewhere, and, no, she just, died in a castle that she wasn't allowed to leave. And then when they went to go bury her, the townspeople were like, oh, hell no, you're not burying her in our graves. Fuck that shit. Go bury her somewhere else. And so now nobody knows where her body is.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see why there's a lot of legends about this person. It makes me wonder how many, podcasts or TV episodes and stuff like that have just been about this character.
Yeah, I mean, surprisingly, I'm not really into the whole true crime scene or anything like that, but I do find historical figures like this interesting. I find that she's a story that doesn't come up all that often. At least in my experience. Before watching this film and looking up the actual person, I knew, I had heard different pop culture things talk about, like, the vampire who bathes in the blood of their victims or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Like, I kind of knew this was a thing.
Uh-huh. But other than that...
I didn't know anything about it.
Right. Normally when you hear... Because since she has, like, a vampire legacy, normally when you hear something like that, you're more likely to hear about, like, Vlad the Impaler versus Elizabeth Bathroy.
Yeah.
But yeah. Again, interesting film. Not very closely related to the history at all. But this was still fun regardless.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's going to be it for this episode.
Mm-hmm. I know you don't... Neither of us are horror people.
And I'm even less so than you.
Yeah. But we found this fun. So...
Yeah. So, like, if you're even mildly into horror stuff, you'll probably enjoy this.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, next time, we're going back to Japan for what will probably be the last time this year. And we're going for a very different movie. One that I think is incredibly child-friendly. Mm-hmm. We are watching 11 Hungry Cats.
Aw, that sounds adorable.
I think it is. So see you guys then.
Bye.